What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today I'm going to show you how you can quit your game, which is very simple, but we're going to show the entire menu, the way I do that, and also adding a little pop-up that says, are you sure you want to quit your game? And you can hit no to stay in the game, or yes to actually close the game. Now, in the editor, this isn't that important, right? Because you can just always hit escape and it will just close the session. You can even have it to where if you're in windowed mode, escape might actually close your app or game anyway. Of course, you can Alt F4 to close it as well. But when you're in a game, you know, you're using a controller maybe, or you're in a certain situation where it's full screen and you're trying to give the player immersive experience, or they don't have a keyboard, you want them to be able to quit the game on their own, you know, through their own choice and decisions. Also, it kind of, if you actually exit the game this way, it kind of gives the players a peace of mind about, you know, making sure that all their progress saved and the game was shut down correctly and things like that. So we can do a lot of that when we go to exit the game manually like this. Also, for something like when we package our game, which I put out an episode on this previous Friday, but here's the iCard right here. When we package our game, and then you won't be able to actually quit your game at all without having some way to manually exit. Escape doesn't do it by default. So we will have the ability to do it in here. You can use that in your package game and it will work. You can also do this in standalone, which is the same case. So let's go over everything we did. It should be a pretty simple episode, and there's not going to be any code today. This is all going to be within the widgets themselves. And just so you're aware, I mentioned the packaging episode a little bit earlier, but also here is the entire fighting game playlist if you'd like to get caught up to where we are and see everything we've done to this point. There's still plenty more to do, but we've made good progress, and if you'd like to check out everything we've done, here's how you can do that. All right. So to get started, we need to create a new widget if we want the pop-up that I have here. You don't need a pop-up. You could just literally add the quick game button and we'd be good to go. But you may want a pop-up or an additional like confirmation from the player. A lot of games do. So I'm going to show you both just in case you do want that. If you do want the pop-up, go ahead and add it now. Just go into your widgets folder wherever you have this stuff. Add new, user interface, and make a new widget. I called it exit game pop-up. We'll go over that first because while it's not too complicated, we do want to think about it while we are in our main menu and the logic that we're going to want to have for it. So to set it up, I made it a very simple one. I didn't use any actual assets. I didn't create any assets. I do use my custom buttons that I made. They are shrunk down a little bit here, so they look maybe a little bit funny, but this should be good enough. I do use scale and size boxes so that this will scale with the screen, and it will be in the center of the screen. I have an episode on that if you'd like to check it out. It'll be in that iCard in the top right corner. But anyway, here I'll show you everything that I've done really quickly. The exact values aren't going to matter because, you know, you're going to make this however you want to on your own. But I have a scale box, and then I have scale by safe zone as the stretch, because if you scale these other things, it's going to try to fit it to the screen. Like, it has to know what it's trying to scale to. But scale by safe zone will basically make it to where it is the size of the widget itself. Like, I only made the widget this big. So by trying to scale this to the safe zone, it's automatically going to the center. What I mean by that is if you had, for example, well, I can't do it actually because it's on, it's without it, but it looked like this, right, when it was normal. This is how I created my widget. When you change this, the safe zone, as you can see here, scales to the content according to the size of the safe zone currently applied to the viewport. And the safe zone is the entire thing, so it's trying to go into the center, and there you go. Then I have a size box under that. It doesn't really matter what you do here. This is just to help it scale as well with the screen size. different aspect ratios. You will probably have to do some manual overrides as well for certain screen sizes if they're too big or too small. And that's normal. We're going to do that for a lot of widgets, even though I mentioned it before. It's kind of going to come down to a case-by-case basis. So we will cover all of them eventually, but I'm going to ignore it for now because I'm not going to go through 30 different things in this small episode. Okay, and so then I have my canvas panel, and from here it's very simple. I have what I call a little pop-up background, which is a little image. Right now all I did was I gave it a color and opacity, but you can definitely put like an image, like a window image here for a pop-up box. And then I added 2 buttons, which are literally just like, so image for the background and then 2 buttons for yes and no. So I added a yes BTN, no BTN, so yes button, no button. Made sure the buttons are variables. And then I gave them both a Z order of 1, just to make sure that they are popping up on top of the background. That way I can still click them with the mouse if you want to do that. And also so that they can be focused or hovered, and things like that. Then I applied 2 text boxes as children of the button. So I just literally click and drag the text on top of the button. And then they will become children of it. And I just put the text as yes or no. You can change your font settings here. Okay. And then lastly, I have the confirmation text, which is again text, but it is not a child of either of the buttons. It's just the child of the canvas panel. See it here? And that's this text right here. Are you sure you want to quit the game? So there's a few things with this one. You see that it looks like it's it actually looks like it's the background or the box that surrounds this background. This is because I want it to show up in the middle of this little pop-up, no matter what. And it is scaling by the safe zone, and it's a child of that. So it will scale and do that stuff. However, it doesn't necessarily mean it would be in the center of this box. If you would like it to be, a very simple way you can do that is you make the text as big as the object that you want it to be centered in. So you can see the text boxes here. I could change it and it would move, right? But if I undo this, I made it the size of the background. It's technically supposed to be the exact same size. It must have gotten adjusted at some point, but 900 by 400. I look at my background as 900 by 400. I put in my text, change my font settings, whatever. And then for justification, I put middle. If you put it in the middle, then it'll be centered. And then it'll look like this. So you'll basically have this nice little look, this nice looking pop-up box. You can add your own images and add a border and make this look a lot nicer, but this is the standard version. This is all you need to actually see the functionality working. The rest you can change to your liking. Okay, we're going to go to the main menu screen now. This is our main menu screen widget, whatever yours looks like. Because now we're going to start integrating all the quit logic and spawning the pop-up. So for the main menu screen, all I've done is I've added another button. If you followed this series, this is probably very simple, but just so you're aware, it's literally a button that I've called quit button, made it a variable, and I've added the text quit as a child. Now, the way our input system works is it's actually custom. So it is not like, I'm not using Unreal's input system. We have this whole system set up for where we listen for input actions, and then we move it based on the input that is given. Now, I'm going to show this in full with the pop-up menu in a second. So if you're not familiar with that, with this method, then don't worry, I will be covering it. But I'm not going to cover it on the main menu screen because that one's a lot more in depth. There's a lot more we do with this one. So the only thing that we really have to change on this one specifically is we have added a new button. So we need to make sure that our max selections also increases. It was 4 before because it's the actual number of selections we have. Well, now we've added a 5th. So we need the ability to go to all 5 of them. So max selections updates 1. And then in the everywhere where we had these hard-coded amounts, like for example, these clear selections. So we were, when we would move away from one of the buttons that we were selecting, it would go back to its regular state. And what I mean by that is if I move, you see the selected one is blue. So we were clearing these when we would go away from them. I have added one for the quit button as well here. Now, a lot of people have suggested, why don't you just, have a function called like clear selection and you pass it a button reference and do this on it? That is absolutely correct. You are 100% right. That would work. That would be even cleaner and it would probably be less work. So feel free to do that. Really, you would just make a function or an event that takes in a button parameter as the variable type, and then you pass that into this box. So feel free to do that. Like I said, it's a good idea. But you don't have to. Performance-wise and all, it's not really going to hurt anything. In fact, I don't think it'll change anything at all. Nothing noticeable. If we do want the pop-up, there is one thing we will have to check and move selection. But that can be ignored until we make the pop-up, because I'll explain that later. Everything else is the same. Just, again, if you are doing the more manual method that I did originally, and then I have in here, make sure you add the quit button to be able to be highlighted as well. So the one in the event graph was clearing it back to the gray color. This is making it the blue color. And then we have clear path selections where we get rid of all the colors depending on, what action we're doing. So this is very self-explanatory. Basically, it checks to make sure we're not on this index and then clears that selection. And this is where we call the index to clear the quit button. So I've just added it to the end. You can follow the exact same method as all the ones prior if you followed the series. Okay, but all that really is just my personal way of doing it. It's not really important. I just wanted to show it so that you were aware of everything that I had. Now, here's where the stuff actually gets important and what we're actually trying to do, not just based on design choices. So we can do a few things here. When we hit quit, we can literally just exit the game. If you want to do that, it's as simple as this. You take in your confirm selection, so when a button was pressed, you could even do this if you're not using my custom input system. You could do this when the button is pressed, literally call the quit game node. This isn't really important because this is for non-shipping builds only. So this is for trying to force the game to close for testing reasons and things like that. The quit preference is if you want to actually close it or if you want to send it to the background. Right now we're going to be closing it, but I could see why we'd want to send it to the background. And specific player is if a player themselves are going to be quitting the game. So if you had multiple players attached to a game instance, and then you wanted to have one of the players quit, but not all of them, that's how you'd use that. But we don't care about that right now either. We're in the single player menu right now. So quit game without changing anything is good to go. But I want to do it through the pop-up, so I'm not going to actually do it there. Here's how we're going to set it up. So on the switch on int for confirm P1 select, this is where we choose all of our logic. Right now, this is all the same, but this actually could be different. So, story mode, arcade mode versus mode practice mode. We may want to do different things when each one is selected. So that's why I actually made them different. However, if we hit quit, which is index 4, because it's 0 through 4, which is, this is the 5th element, but since it starts at 0, then there are, index 4 is where our quit button is. So on index 4, we want to spawn an instance of our pop-up widget, which is our exit game pop-up. We want to add it to the viewport. And then in here, all we did was the design view so far. We're basically going to follow our custom input system, but it's going to be less input, so it should be pretty simple. For those that have already seen it, feel free to just basically use the logic you already know. However, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to go over how I do it. It won't take very long. So make sure we do a few things first, though. So add a widget reference to our main menu screen, or whatever screen, whatever widget is going to be creating it. So for me, the main menu screen is the only widget that will be creating this pop-up. So in my exit game pop-up, I've added a variable called creator widget reference, which is the main menu screen. Right here, the object reference. And we need to set that before we work on the exit game pop-up. We need to set that when we actually spawn this widget. And there's a reason for that. And that's because we want to know if the pop-up is up or not. Should we still perform other logic? So, for example, if I hit quit here and the pop-up's up, I don't want to be able to go up and down on the main menu screen. I want this pop-up to have all the focus. Now, if you want that for whatever reason, then great. But I don't. I think it looks junky. If the player can modify multiple menus at the same time, I think it's a little bit weird. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to make sure that the player can only modify the pop-up while the pop-up is up, but then they regain control of the main menu afterward. So that's why here, once I spawn the pop-up, I then drag off of it and set the variable we just made, the creator widget reference. And then I set it to self reference, just like that. And so now it's saying this widget that created it is basically the owner. You could also just do the owner, but I like this in case we need to do anything else on the main menu. It's up to you though. Just basically you need a reference back to this widget. And then additionally, I've made this is QuickGameUp Boolean in the main menu screen. That way I can stop selections, from being moved or highlighted, and basically stop the player from adjusting this menu while the pop-up is up. So once it gets confirmed that the player has hit quit game, then I just manually set is quit game up to true. And then in move selection, remember I said we would be modifying that. All I do is before all this logic was all how we move. It's been in here since our custom input system for menus. The very first nodes I put in here are just is quit game up into a branch, and only if it's false can I do any of this logic. Basically, if the quit game pop-up is up, then just don't do anything. If it can't move, it won't move the selection border. If it can't move the selection border, it won't clear the past selections. Technically, you could actually confirm still. So you might want to put it here too. But we're going to actually just manually consume input on that pop-up, so it won't hurt anything. Up to you if you want to do that additional safety check, but it's not required. You see I don't use it here. Okay, and then now it's very simple actually. All we want to do is go into our exit game pop-up, and we're going to make our little custom input system here. The only actions we can do on this pop-up are yes, no, and that's it. So we want to be able to move between them, and we want to be able to confirm our option. So there's 3 things we need to put at the start. And remember, this is a single player menu. There would never be 2 players modifying, like being able to control this box. So we don't have to worry about that here. So we want 3 listen for input actions. Now, what these are is they bind to an input action that we have in our project. If I go to edit project settings and input action, input, and then look at my action mappings, you can see I have these menu inputs, which these are inputs that may share, the same inputs as we press in the game, but we want these to be universally the same on every menu. Even if the player changes the controls or changes the input device, the controls across the menu should be the same. So for example, menu left P1, I can either use the gamepad left thumbstick left, gamepad left thumbstick right, or the A and D keys. I also have a menu confirm, which is like a button or an X button. And I just have 1 or the gamepad face button bottom. So I listen for action, literally listen for input action right here. Do that 3 times, and I put in each of the actions that the user can do. So move left, so menu left P1, move right, menu right P1, and menu confirm P1. All right. And then I drag off this callback. What this means is when this input action is detected, it will then perform this function in the callback. So I drag off the callbacks and I do add custom event. And I do one for each of them. And then I name it. You know, when you make your custom event, it'll be like custom event 0. Name it to what the action is. So just P1 menu left, P1 menu right, P1 menu confirm. We'll have to make these functions, so you won't be able to fill those out yet. And then this we're also going to have to make. So let's start with the first one, which is move selection. This is the primary one because this gets us from one option to the other, so to the yes or to the no. And it's directly copied from the main menu screen and the other widgets where I use this method. The short version, if you have not seen it in other episodes, is you're going to want a current... You don't need to call it this. This is for multiplayer menus, really. But you need a current selection integer that identifies what index the the player is currently on in the menu. And I've set that to be 1 because I read it from left to right. And you can see that when I'm doing a confirmation box, like am I sure I want to quit, I usually like to start on no. I think that's pretty good practice. I think game designers will tell you that. You don't want to necessarily start on yes. So I start on no, so I actually start on 1. So current P1 selection instead of 0 is 1. And then I make another integer max selections, which is the actual number of selections that there are. There's yes and there's no. So there's 2 selections. So I set max selections to 2. Then we do the logic you see in front of me. So we have this thing called direction, which is an integer that is an input parameter to the move selection function. And this is going to be direction as in like left or right, so -1 or 1. And it can also account for up and down. Say you have 5 elements in a row. You could actually, add 5 if you want to go down, or subtract 5 if you want to go up. And that's how we do it on things like our character select screen. So when you call move selection now that you've made the function, you can call it in these events in your event graph. Move selection, if you're moving left, I'm assuming that's -1. If you're moving right, it's +1. This last one we can't do yet because we haven't made confirm selection. But then we're just going to follow this logic. It's pretty simple. It might look a little convoluted, but it's pretty simple, I promise. We're going to take the current selection, which will be 1 at the start, and we're going to add another integer. We're going to add the direction. So if we press left, we're going to go down to 0 because it was a -1 that came in here. If we press right, we're going to try and go up to 2. All right. But there's 2 conditions that could stop us. It's either if we reach the end on the left side or the end on the right side. So current P1 selection plus direction, if that is greater than -1, meaning we have not, 0 would be the first element in the buttons. So if it's greater than -1, we are still within a valid index, at least as far as the left side goes. But we also don't want to be too many selections in. So this result also has to be less than the number of max selections. So greater than -1 and less than 2 is what this evaluates to. So 0 or 1. This is an AND Boolean node, so only if both of these are true will this return true. Goes into this branch. And if it is true, then finally we update the value. So we can move between 0 and 1, or in this case, really it's just left and right. Now we call a new function called move selection border. Now, I've just made another function that represents this visually, so it's very simple. You can add this if you'd like. So add a new function here, and I called it move selection border. It does need the actual index that is being modified. So instead of direction, I called it selection this time, but it's an integer that represents what button or icon we're performing this interaction on. And then I also have a Boolean called play sound effects just to determine if we want to play a sound, a menu sound when the player moves or presses an input. You don't always want to play it depending on if it moved automatically, like at the start. I start them at no, remember? Like here, I start the button at the no option. So I don't want to play sound effects here. But as I move back and forth, I do want to play the sound effect, because that's the player doing that. So once you make this function and give it these two parameters, you can go back into your event graph and fill this last node in here in event construct. And what I do is I manually highlight the no button first, as I've been saying. So I don't play the sound effect. I set that to false, and I set the selection to 1, which is the rightmost index, or the no button. Now, if we go into move selection border, this is also pretty simple. This is another section that could be cleared up with a single function. You could just pass in the button and do this operation on it each time. So feel free to do that if you want to clean up the code. But basically, play sound effects goes into this branch. If it's true, it will play the corresponding sound. If it's false, it will go into the switch statement on the selection to know what button it is that we are currently selecting. Now, what this is, this looks very scary or something, but it's not. Basically, you take each button. In my case, it's the yes and the no button, and you get them. You drag off and you set style. And you want, I believe you want this one, yes, the one with the widget style, and you can split the struct pin, and you can split whatever you need to access it. Since we are using our own custom input system, we want to just use the widget style normal, so that's how it looks all the time, whether you're hovering it or whatever with the mouse. And then you want to select the image of your like highlighted button. That would be the blue button in my case. They're normally all gray, but this operation right here sets them to be blue. So if it's index 0, that's my yes button, so that's what I do it on. Otherwise, index 1, that's my no button, so that's what I do this on. You might also want to set the widget style normal draw as box or image. You don't technically have to do that, but it sometimes makes it look better depending on your actual the size of your image that you're using, and also the actual colors and way it was exported. Okay, and then I call it clear path selection, which you saw in the main menu screen, but we're going to make that function now. So let's do that. We actually did it before confirm, but it doesn't matter. Here's clear path selection. So again, another very simple one. Feel free to make a function if you want, but you can just make this function. Doesn't have any parameters. And what we're going to do is, if we are not currently selecting that button anymore, so after we've moved and we highlight the new button, we're going to clear the old buttons. All I do is I check our current selection, see if it's index 0 or 1. So if it's not equal to 0, then we know we want to clear 0. The player is not currently selecting 0, and therefore we don't want to highlight 0. So if this is true, that it's not 0, we clear selection 1. I've made 2 events in the event graph down below. You can right click and add custom event. Called it cleared selection 1 and clear selection 2. And this is the exact thing you just saw before, but I changed the normal image back to the standard one, not the highlighted one. Button var 1 for me for yes button, and clear selection 2 is for no button. And these are the events that I'm calling here. Clear selection 1. Otherwise, whether it's true or false, we still want to go to the other one. And we want to see, is the current P1 selection not equal to 1? If it's not equal to 1, we go into the branch. Then we want to clear selection 2, or index 1. We want to clear the no button. So that gets rid of any like style issues. Lastly, we need our confirm selection. So this is what happens when we actually press yes. Well, it's really if we press yes or no, but whatever happens when we press the input that would, actually select this button. So if I'm on a controller and I press, A here, then I say, nope, that's the confirm. Or I hit yep, and it closes it. That's the confirm. So if we look in the confirm selection, what it has is it has the selection integer. Just like the move selection border, how it had an integer to determine what button we were on. The confirm selection is the exact same. So we have this selection that is an integer. And I'm bringing it into a switch. In this case, it doesn't really matter. There's only 2. But if you had multiple inputs, then a switch would be perfect. Now, if we want to actually quit the game, we can use that quit game node I mentioned earlier. Very simple and should do the job. Otherwise, if we're on the no button, then we can use our creator widget reference, bring it into the editor, and then convert to validated get. If you do that, just make sure that there won't be errors or crashes if this is not valid. However, it won't be able to remove that from parent, just so you are aware. Now, this should never not be valid, but it is good to check from time to time. And since this is the only place we were actually using this in this widget, it is kind of important that we know that it's valid before using it. But if it is valid, then I drag off of it and I set the is quit game up back to false here, saying, yep, the is quit game is up, so you can, go back to using the inputs as you'd like on the main menu screen. Then we're going to remove this widget from the parent. Remove from parent, just basically, you can read this comment if you'd like, but really what it does is it will get rid of this widget from the player screen or viewport. And so it's basically going to destroy this widget. Now, two other things that we have to account for here. So now remember we had this listen for input action with the callback, P1 menu confirm. That should call confirm selection, and we should pass in our current P1 selection, whatever that is. That's the selection we want to confirm it on. But we also want to click this consume box here. Consume means it will basically take the input in and not let anybody else have it. I've listened for this input, I've captured it, and now I'm the only one that can use it. This is important. If you don't consume input here, then when you do this, you won't be able to actually quit the game. You won't be able to actually close this pop-up, because even if you close the pop-up, another one gets created right away by the main menu screen. It gets closed and says, oh, you're pressing that input, because we look for this confirm input on both the main menu screen and the exit game pop-up. But if you consume, this is the only one that can have it. So now this is the only one that can have it, and then once it gets it, we're good to go, and then you can go into the game. So there you go, guys. That's how you can make a little exit pop-up and an exit game ability, and that will work in your full game. And since it's single player only, that functionality is pretty much complete. We might want to do some saving and loading data that will end up tying into this, because when we exit, we'll probably want to save, and when we start up, we'll want to load. However, that's not something we have in place right now, so this is pretty much as good as it can get for now. And it shouldn't really need any changes unless you want to clean up the functions like I was talking about earlier. Anyway, guys, that's all I got, though. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. There's more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do. I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon members and YouTube membership subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support, and for continuing to support and watch this series. I really love it. I'm glad you guys love it as well. I can't wait to see how far we get this year. I know we have a long way to go, but we've made such good work since last year. And I'm very, very excited to see it. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.